The market is increasingly demanding information about companies' sustainability impacts and value creation. It's time for companies to bring investors and stakeholders along on their sustainability transformation journey through credible reporting and assurance. In this episode of TechTalk, we talk about how technology can support a more strategic and holistic approach to long-term value creation and help companies have a wider positive impact on society. Joining us is Julien Melotte, who is leading our industrial and public sector risk assurance practice with a particular focus on sustainability, and Julien Jacqué, who is leading projects specializing in large-scale business transformations, supply chain technology, and ESG transformation. So, stay with us as we deep dive into technology for sustainability. Welcome to a new episode of Tech Talk. This is episode 20, season 5, and the topic is technology for sustainability. Welcome, Armin. How are you?
Oh, I'm feeling great today. I'm feeling a bit guilty because I was so busy the whole day, but I'm so excited about this topic. Actually, sustainability is something that's very close to my heart, and I'm excited to hear what are we actually doing as a firm on this sustainability topic, because many times we've been asked by our clients, what does PwC do? What kind of services do you offer? And so on. So today we have two top experts. I think it's going to be a very good conversation.
So would
just
you like
raising the expectations a bit there for the
no
guest
pressure.
speakers?
It sounds a bit like that.
Yes, indeed. So welcome, Julien and Julien. So
we need to come up with some nicknames here, because I think the guests will be confused.
So do you have any nicknames actually that your friends and family?
People are calling me Ju. That's fine for me.
They're calling me Ju too. Is that it?
Juju, but that's not bad. Let's just do. We can just do JJ.
JJ
Juju
and
and
Ju.
JJ.
Okay, perfect. Great. So let's start with asking one very simple question, I hope. Who are you? JJ and Ju. Can you introduce yourselves to our listeners?
Of course. So I'm Ju. I'm a Lux-based partner. So I'm leading our efforts around sustainability, assurance, and consulting towards the non-financial sector. So I'm really focusing on enhancing processes, controls around non-financial information, and of course providing assurance over those type of reports. So really pleased to be here with you today to discuss the importance of technology and data for ESG.
Yes, and so my name is Julien Jacqué, just because JJ probably will not be able to find me. So I'm a senior manager in PwC technology consulting department, mainly focused on helping non-financial sector clients basically performing and let's say transforming into a sustainable business through ESG. I think I'm a strong believer in companies that can do well but also do good, and I think technology and data plays a huge part in that, and that's a bit exactly what I specialize in.
Great. Well, can I start with the first question, because I'm the dummy on the topic. So we hear a lot of these terms like corporate responsibility reports, sustainability, ESG, and sometimes they are used interchangeably. But I guess they are not the same. So could you explain what they mean, how they are different? That would be great. Thank you.
Of course. So you're right. ESG, CSR, net zero, decarb, or again, taxonomy are common words today. So we see them coming up in any type of discussion or any type of business article you might read nowadays. But if we take a step back, so ESG, and Julien mentioned it already, is all about going beyond profitability. So looking at business from a different angle. So since Paris Agreement in 2015, when close to 200 countries reached an agreement on an international treaty on climate change, governments and companies are starting to set goals and to structure their journey on how to really limit our impact on the planet and reach the ambition on which we have agreed. Of course, decarbonization, being the main impact for the moment, is really at the center of all discussions. And to achieve these decarbonization objectives, so the companies will have really to rethink the way they operate or produce, either by embracing emerging technologies or by turning themselves towards, for example, green energy. Okay. In order to measure globally our progress towards these challenging goals, we have on top some new regulatory requirements which will drive basically the change. We can think about CSRD at European level or TCFD at US level. But to come back to your question, so what do we mean by those acronyms or by those ESG words? So if we speak about sustainable, there we are referring to the shift from profit only to really doing things well and good for the environment and for the society. CSR, so which is corporate sustainable responsibility, refers to the framework under which the companies qualitatively describe their impact at the social and environmental level. ESG, there we have three letters and three concepts, so environment, social, and governance. And there we are really thinking about the quantitative side of the equation to evaluate the company's long-term commitment towards carbon, for example, carbon emission reduction. So today, you might know that rating agencies are already starting to evaluate companies on an ESG basis. And what does it mean in practice? So if you get a high ESG score, you might have access to cheaper capital, or on the other side, you might increase the value of your company as well. So finally, a final word on decarbonization and net zero. So there we really focus on the E, we really focus on carbon, and we make sure that the efforts that we are doing collectively are sufficient to reach these Paris agreements from 2015.
Okay, so it looks like that ESG is what investors and other stakeholders are using to measure the performance of a company and their activities across environment, social, and governance. So what are the key drivers behind ESG today?
Yeah, so in terms of drivers, there we have a myriad of different factors. I think specifically, obviously, there's a key driver from the stakeholder perspective. But if we take a small step back, I think PwC as a firm also identified like some five kind of what we call mega trends. So some really macroeconomic and geostrategic trends and shifts that are happening globally, and these are also indirectly driving the topic, right? Because it's not that ESG popped out of nowhere. It's been a slow progress and an evolution. These kind of five mega trends, we kind of define them by a kind of an acronym called ADAPT. So the first one is asymmetry. So as an example, increasing wealth disparity and an erosion of the middle class. Disruption. So let's say the disruption around technology, climate change, macro events. I mean, we see it now even with the war in Russia and Ukraine. Age, in terms of population shifts, changing pressure on demographics, polarization. So, kind of a breakdown of the global consensus, nationalism, which we also see around the world. And then the last one is trust. So kind of this view of declining confidence in different institutions, even personal digital security. I mean, it's something that we all deal with, I think, on social media. And these five mega trends, let's say over time, have really started changing, what stakeholders expect from companies. And that companies should start taking a part in, let's say, solving these larger issues, and that it's not only up to governments to do that. So, I mean, you mentioned some already. I mean, Ju also mentioned them, right? So, I mean, if you look at kind of the ecosystem of key stakeholders for companies, you obviously have, let's say, first from like regulatory pressure that you really explained already in detail with COP21. Then specifically, if we look at Europe, the European Green Deal, and then now more recently the Fit for 55 package, which is really now starting to change and optimize existing legislation to the EU Green Deal ambition, basically for Europe becoming the first carbon neutral continent. So that's the government piece is one major stakeholder, obviously, which is in a way a license to operate. So it's a very serious threat, or let's say expectations set by them. Then if you kind of look at the next priority for business, obviously it's consumers, right, and customers. So we see really a big shift there. I mean, there's a few, KPIs, or let's say, that you could list off, like 8 and 10 consumers, are more likely to buy from companies that support ESG initiatives, especially in the B2C space. The expectations are much higher. B2B indirectly, obviously, if the B2C clients, or let's say companies, want to decarbonize their supply chain, they need to also then indirectly enforce that with their B2B suppliers, right? Then you have the investor piece, which you also touched on a little bit, the ratings around MSCI. You have S&P. This is becoming more and more crucial for investors to not only evaluate businesses on their financial performance, let's say the classic annual report perspective, but also on non-financial indicators. And that's also pushing a lot of customers, I think, which need to start upgrading their non-financial reporting really into this investor grade style reporting. And then if we look at the broader piece of society and, let's say, employees, right? Attracting talent is also a major issue today for many companies. And also there, the expectations are high for, let's say, for the newer generation to, again, be more connected to the business, understand the strategy, and also see what the company itself is doing around ESG, around sustainability. So that businesses really demonstrate that they also care about these issues.
It was very surprising to me to see that I think it was SAP 500 ESG index kicked out some of the companies that we thought were at the forefront of the sustainability initiative.
Yeah.
And the whole world was kind of shocked. And it just goes on to say that how maybe misinformed we are, or how little knowledge we have on actually what makes a company green, right?
And you're touching on a good point there, man. I think the system's also not perfect, right? I mean, you have some companies that have very high ratings that are technically in an industry that you could say is less green than others. I mean, I think we all know the company that you're specifically talking about. I mean, that business itself is making quite a strong push, especially on the E factor, right? Really supporting kind of this energy transition on the transportation space. The system's not perfect. We know that. We also know that, let's say, even from a regulation or from a framework perspective, there's tons of different frameworks that you have today. It's very difficult for our clients, and even us, PwC Luxembourg, because we also obviously report on our ESG position, to to find the right way to act. But I think it's going to be something that's going to evolve over time, and I think exactly.
And these are a lot of expectations as well, and I guess they have a big impact in the entire business, and they will require fundamental transformation of how the business operates. Did I get that right?
Yes, completely.
Great.
So
not so dummy anymore.
So if we want to achieve that common goal, everyone has to play his role, right? And sustainability will need to be embodied in each and every organization, and will have an impact and will require them to transform, basically. So if we start the journey to be able to set proper ambition on the E side, as we said, for example, in terms of carbon emission reduction, S or G side, and to report the progress of the company along the time, each company will have first to understand where they stand today, right? What we call the baselining. Either we baseline our carbon emission, we baseline our energy consumption, etc. And in order to do so, there is an emerging challenge coming up, which is the fact that it will require new or uncollected data that were existing in the past. When we look at it from the outside, it might seems to be easy to cope with that new challenge. But wanted just to give you an example, because we are PwC as well, as part of our own net zero journey, confronted to such a challenge. So we have set really strong ambition to become net zero by 2030 as a network. And in order to do that, we had to baseline first our carbon emissions. It goes from scope 1, scope 2 to scope 3. Obviously, being a service delivery entity, the scope 3 is taking a huge importance. We don't have factories, we don't have that type of activity. And within that scope 3 emissions, what are the main ones? But for example, the emissions coming up from the employee commuting every day to the office from their home, or again, business travel emissions. So if we take the example of commuting emissions, you quickly realize that to baseline that very precisely, you will need new data. You will need to know exactly where your employees are living and the number of kilometers that are separating their home to the office, the average number of days they are spending at the office with a new way of working. And on the other side, again, the average carbon emission of their vehicles. So you can see the challenge. It seems a bit
unattainable.
Yeah, exactly. But we are only speaking about a small portion of what needs to be achieved in terms of non-financial reporting, in terms of setting ambition towards the E and the S. So all in all, every companies will have to go through some kind of transformation if they want to be part of the journey. And as we said, to be part of the journey today is maybe not a must, but will probably become a must tomorrow. And what we generally see as a good structure of transformation program for those companies is articulated around 4 main phases. So first, you understand, you baseline. This is what we just discussed. Secondly, you will strategize. So you will set ambitions which are first achievable based on your baseline and based on the technology which is existing and which will support your transition. And you will have to make sure that you properly integrate what you was mentioning around stakeholders' expectations. So making sure that you address your investors, your lenders, your employees' expectation as part of your strategy. Last point important in the strategy, as we were mentioning, regulation is evolving quickly. So some barriers coming from those or challenges coming from those regulations will need to be tackled at the strategy definition and embedded into the ESG strategy of the company. The next step will be to transform. So it's really similar to what has been happening for years now with the digital transformation. So companies will have to transform their current processes, create new ones to support this non-financial reporting. And the main challenge for that will be to properly capture, store, and then compute the relevant data from the new data sources. We were speaking about, for example, carbon emission, average carbon emission of the employee cars, for example, till the end reporting. And there, obviously, the strategy and the goal you will define will very much impose which data needs to be collected and reported. And the last step, of course, is to communicate, right? We are still partially at the moment where people are believing that non-financial reporting is a marketing element. We believe it will very quickly shift to a perception of those non-financial reporting being really creating value for the entities. And in order to create value, you need to embed into those non-financial reports a consistent story, something that makes sense to you, to your activity, with clear ambitions, relevant targets, relevant KPIs. And this will be, from my perspective, considered as a must going forward.
Yeah, and we see also from the upcoming regulations, right, for the CSRD, it's also will be audited. So
exactly,
as soon as the information will be audited, and I think as time progresses, most likely will also be used in a database to then also for future investors and even consumers. And eventually also companies to benchmark themselves against each other. So it's also a huge opportunity and a risk that I think if certain actions aren't taken, that not only will that be visible, but over time it will also demonstrate who is progressing and who is not.
Yeah, and companies are more and more held accountable for what they do, and people want to work for companies that do so. So I think it's a must already, actually, in my view.
So where and how does technology and data play a role in these sustainability and ESG transformations, and within which phases? that you just mentioned?
Yeah, so I mean, I think Ju touched on it, right? I mean, so similarly to, you know, let's say a digital transformation, an ESG or sustainability transformation, the technology and data piece is really one of the core enablers, right? I think maybe to keep it simple, what we usually do is we try to split it into kind of two different distinctive roles that data and technology play within that transformation. So on one side, obviously, it's a major player for driving the transition, right? By transition, meaning the shift from, let's say, carbon heavy emitting energy sources or activities to, let's say, low carbon or greener activities. So that's one piece. I mean, obvious examples there are, you know, our wind, solar, hydropower. In some specific industries, you also have, you know, like aviation, you have the sustainable aviation fuel, or biofuel in transportation, maritime. So those are very distinct examples of where technology is playing a role in that transition. And then the second role is obviously about enabling transparency. So Drew also touched on that. So by transparency, meaning not only externally to, you know, the stakeholders that we touched on, like regulators or even investors, but also internally, right? So in terms of once a strategy is set, so the ability to be able to monitor then also the progress towards those targets, and then also adapt as time goes on, because technology also will heavily evolve. For many sectors today, technology is also a limiting factor when we talk to our clients, because they're just unsure, first of all, which let's say renewable technology source will win the battle. And so also in terms of for let's say asset heavy industries, it's very difficult for them to make big bets on different technologies because they don't know where it will be in 5-10 years. And if you think about asset heavy industries where they where you have an investment cycle of 30 years, those are huge questions now that they have today, because by 2050 they need to be net zero. And so the next major purchases that they do in their fleet or in their specific activities is really driven by that. So they're very nervous. So those are the two kind of key roles: this driving the transition, enabling the transparency, in terms of role, and then of course for which phases. Again, as a key enabler, it really stretches across all four. That's probably not the answer that anyone wanted to hear, but I think also the answer that everyone expected in a way, right? So, I mean, you touched on in the understand phase. Obviously, technology is going to be a major, technology and data is going to be a major enabler to, first of all, understand your greenhouse gas footprint. Also baselining with benchmarks across your different peers, and also customers potentially. I mean, we see also clients specifically asking us to look at what are our customers doing, right? Because those are also going to be major drivers. We talked about that. And we see it also in the market where some of the major players in their industry are indirectly making strong stands and using their leverage as a big player in that industry to also indirectly then impact their suppliers, right? I mean, you see it with Deutsche Bank, who recently announced this. BlackRock as well, who has a very clear statement on where they stand around sustainability.
JP Morgan as well,
yes,
just the other day.
Exactly.
Yeah,
so you see that these big players are really leveraging their position to indirectly impact. And so that's also why we see clients saying, no, please don't only have a look at our peers in terms of competition, but have a look at our top 5 or 10 customers, because those are also the discussions that they're having. Then I think around strategize, we also have specifically, scenario modeling for risks and opportunities. So there's a few specific regulations like the TCFD, where you need to identify different scenarios in terms of, what if the temperature increases to 2 degrees or 1.5, what would be the impact, for instance, especially for multinational businesses that are distributed geographically close to ports, they're really exposed to very physical and acute risks in the short term, not only the transitional risks in terms of identifying new ways of operating. And then in the transform, of course, very clearly there, the transition we already talked about. I mean, it's that's one major factor. And then in terms of transparency, the big point there is obviously the enterprise and data architecture is going to be a major driver. So it's about really identifying which systems and processes around data and technology that you have internally existing today, what might need to be updated in the future to obviously deal with the strategy that you set. And there it can sound like a very complex process, but I think we have a relatively pragmatic approach of doing that. So what we usually do is we really look at first the existing architecture and capabilities. So what we call kind of the as is of the business itself. We properly document that, and then we move towards defining the future target architecture for that business, which is really driven by then the strategy and the specific use cases of what they need or want to report on, right? And then and that's what we call the 2B. And then what we do is we compare, the capabilities that we have today versus the ones that we need to have in the future, and then we identify the gap. And so then once we have identified those gaps, we basically categorize them into different building blocks. And then those building blocks, we kind of perform a scenario analysis dependent on, the client's activities, what kind of also IT guiding principles they have, what kind of technologies they work with, many different driving factors to identify then, okay, for those building blocks, do we either build it internally? Do we need to buy it externally? Do we need to do a hybrid? And there's a lot of different, factors that play into that. I mean, as an example, we have some clients that are, have a strong SAP base in terms of applications. They have tons of data also in SAP. They use SAP in terms of analytics. Or others that are more Microsoft based. Others, they really best of breed. So they have a mix of different technologies that they use. And so that kind of scenario analysis then, kind of identifies, okay, from a business perspective, what are the use cases? What are the needs that are required? And then from a technology perspective, also, what are the limitations or what are kind of the guiding principles that we've set that we want to maintain? And so once we have that view, we kind of then define a solution roadmap with a horizon looking at short, medium, and long term, because you cannot obviously tackle all of the different, let's say, gap building blocks in the short term. You have to make decisions on what's most important. And then from there, you have a solid foundation, understanding of this is where I am, this is where I want to go. These are the building blocks that need to be adapted. And these are the decisions that we've as a business made around building, buying, or making this or a hybrid solution. And then it's about obviously implementing that and transforming that within that space.
I think what's interesting is when we work with the clients and they always ask, oh, okay, so what do I do now? So what do I have to do today? Like where, will the bank stop financing me today if I don't do anything? And the answer is usually no. But there's a tsunami of regulation coming your way. So it kind of seems like it's happening very slowly, and then it's going to happen all of a sudden, right? So in the next few years, it's going to be really a breaking point for a lot of these companies that are going to be hit by this tsunami of the ESG regulation.
That's true.
I think, especially as we get closer to 2030, where let's say, especially on the European continent, it's going to be one major milestone for the Fit for 55 package. This is really going to massively accelerate, I think, not only the regulations coming in the next few years, but also, like we talked about, bigger businesses taking stances, and maybe the bigger businesses also that are better positioned to meet that target will also want to leverage that as a differentiator, right? I mean, which is understandable.
Well, yeah, and time flies, so it seems like it's far away, but it's not that far away.
No.
Okay, well, it sounds like technology and data is fully embedded throughout the whole sustainable and ESG transformation. So to make it practical, could you share one or two client requests that you're currently working on?
Maybe before we go back to that, I wanted to highlight also one point. So we were addressing the importance of technology at the strategy definition, right? We were touching as well the importance of technology during the transformation, which seems logical. But again, it's important as well when we think about our way to communicate on non-financial KPIs, right? We were saying that ESG will be a driver for value creation. So all stakeholders are having expectation in terms of KPIs to be reported by the companies, to be able to track them along the time, and to be able to see the progress towards what companies were really setting as an ambition, right? And the all these upcoming non-financial reporting requirements at European and US level will come along with an assurance need, which means that this information will need to be audited. And here again, the importance of having those elements audited is because these information will be really taken as the basis for the decision that will be made by all stakeholders surrounding the companies. So assurance will play a crucial role in that because it will really bring trust to the information that is being reported by the companies. So doing really the parallel with what we have in place today as part of the financial reporting process, putting in place some strong new non-financial reporting process supported by the relevant technology and data will clearly define what is the next generation of non-financial reporting process. Maybe, Julien, if you want to illustrate by one example of what we are doing for one of our clients.
Yeah, that's a very good segue to for that one. Thanks, Ju. So yeah, I mean, exactly like Ju was just mentioned, we have one specific client, or maybe I start with the challenges a little bit, who have set some ambitious ESG targets, who actually are reporting, I think, beyond the requirements today because they're in the telecom industry where there's also high expectations, especially around the social commitments and activities that within the industry. And so they've really built out a lot of different KPIs, a lot of different metrics that they're reporting on today. And at the same time, they also are a multinational business with different subsidiaries in various countries. And so they also have this challenge of not only meeting, let's say, the global requirements, but also the national requirements, as well as, let's say, consolidating all of this information then for the central or the group report. And so these are really these big challenges that they have. High targets, lots of KPIs, geographically distributed business with different local requirements and needs. And at the same time, growing expectations for their industry to report more, but also the desire for them to be kind of a leader in the space. And so what's the discussions that we've been having with them is basically supporting them in upgrading these non-financial processes, controls, and also reporting systems really into what we call investor grade, right? So basically combining the financial reporting that they do today and the robustness that exists with their non-financial reporting side. And that's a big and I think a good objective for this business specifically, because it also allows them then to position themselves as a leader in the space, and specifically, it will allow them really to give this transparency to the different stakeholders that they have, and create this investor grade reporting where not only can they externally report, internally they can monitor that as they go forward, but also they will build in a certain amount of credibility. Not only behind what they report, but also behind the figures. And that's really a big pain point for a lot of customers that we see today. And so that's one specific example of how we're tackling that with our clients.
Great. Thank you so much for a very interesting discussion. So maybe to sum it up, we could say that the ESG sustainability or CSR is really about going beyond profitability. And for companies to do that, they need to transform. And this transformation is then enabled by technology and data, right? And where technology and data supports the business in transitioning towards more performant ESG companies and creating the transparency for internal and external stakeholders. So investors, employees, general public, and so on. And what you've told us is that this is actually possible with a pragmatic approach where you would look at what you have today versus what you need tomorrow. And then you'd build a roadmap of different building blocks to get you there.
I think that's an exciting journey in front of us. Quite complex, but with a clear goal, which will benefit to each of us. So really excited by that.
That's true. Any last words, JJ?
I think Ju had a very good closing. Now you're putting me on the spot to come up with a better one.
No pressure.
No, I think on one side, it's definitely a big challenge, not only for our clients, also for us as a firm, right? I mean, it's like Ju mentioned, we also have very aggressive targets that we want to meet. Also in PwC Luxembourg, we're making strong progress and commitments. Let's say, I mean, especially also the move to the new building in the coming years, I think demonstrates also our investment. But at the same time, I think, it opens up a lot of different opportunities for not only us, but also for our clients to differentiate themselves, and to maybe not only do well, but also to do good.
Very important.
Come back to my initial statement.
We've made a full circle.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. It was a pleasure having you in very, very interesting discussion.
Thank you for having us.
So I hope you come back at some point to our Tech Talk. So this is Tech Talk, technology made simple.
Over a cup of coffee.
Or cocktail for you.
Well, it's Friday, maybe. There's a happy hour later.
That's true. That's true. Yes. So maybe see you there.
Perfect.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
And that's all for today. This is Tech Talk, technology made simple over a cup of coffee. Thank you for listening, and until the next episode.